The envelope was waiting for me on the morning of my brother's wedding. It wasn't supposed to be there. I found it tucked beneath a stack of old photographs, in the back of my father's study. Inside a drawer he had always kept locked. My name was written across the front. Not my nickname, not the name my family called me, my full legal name. And beneath it was 6 words that made my hands go cold. Open only after your father dies. I stared at the envelope for almost a minute. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I quickly pushed it back into the drawer. Emma, my mother's voice. I closed the drawer. Coming. I walked out of the study pretending nothing had happened. Downstairs, the house was already full of flowers, perfume, champagne, and relatives pretending everything in our family was perfect. My younger brother, Lucas, was getting married that afternoon. Everyone was celebrating him. My father had spent months talking about the wedding, the venue, the cars, the decorations, the honeymoon, and, most importantly, the gift he planned to give Lucas. A small apartment in the city. Apparently, my father had purchased it months earlier. I knew because I had accidentally seen the documents. I also knew something else. That apartment had once been promised to me. 3 years earlier, my father had told me, "When you're ready to settle down, I'll help you get a place." I believed him. I was 29 then, struggling to build my own business after leaving a corporate job. I never asked him for money. I only believed his promise. Then Lucas needed somewhere to live. And suddenly, the apartment wasn't mine anymore. "Don't look so serious," my mother whispered as she passed me a glass of juice. "It's your brother's day." I forced a smile. "I'm happy for him." She studied my face. "You always say that." "Because it's true." She smiled. But she didn't believe me. Neither did I. By noon, everyone had gathered outside for photographs. My father stood proudly beside Lucas. He looked happier than I had seen him in years. Then he turned toward me. "Emma." I walked over. "Yes, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "After the ceremony, go back to the house and collect the blue folder from my study." My stomach tightened. "The blue folder?" "Yes, it's on the second shelf." He paused. "And don't open anything else." I almost laughed, because suddenly I remembered the envelope. The one with my name. The one that had said, "Open only after your father dies." "Of course," I said. He smiled. Then he walked away. That was the moment I realized something. My father was afraid of what was inside that drawer. And for the first time in my life, I wanted to know why. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Lucas looked happy. My mother cried. My father gave a speech about family, sacrifice, and how proud he was of his son. Everyone applauded. I did too. But I couldn't stop thinking about the envelope. After the ceremony, I returned to the house. The blue folder was exactly where my father had said it would be. I picked it up. Then I looked at the locked drawer. I stood there for several seconds. I could have walked away. I should have. Instead, I remembered every time my father had told me I was imagining things. Every time I had questioned why Lucas received opportunities I didn't. Every time he had said, "Your brother needs me more than you do." So I opened the drawer. The envelope was still there. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. I opened it. Inside was a letter. Not from my father. From a lawyer. I read the first paragraph. Then the second. By the third, I had to sit down. The letter explained that several years earlier, my father had transferred ownership of a small construction company into my name. Without telling me, I stared at the page. That company had debts. Millions of dollars in debts. But that wasn't the worst part. The lawyer explained that my father had also used my identity to sign several business guarantees. If the company collapsed, I could potentially be held responsible for debts I'd never agreed to. My heart began pounding. I kept reading. There were copies of documents, signatures, bank records, tax forms, contracts, and then I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the signatures looked exactly like mine, but I had never signed it. Someone had forged my name. I turned the page. At the bottom was my father's signature. He had authorized everything. I sat in silence. My entire life suddenly looked different. The times he told me I was irresponsible. The times he insisted I needed to prove myself. The times he refused to help me financially. Maybe he wasn't trying to teach me independence. Maybe he was making sure I had no idea what he had done. I took photographs of every document. Then I heard the front door open. My father. I quickly put everything back, but I kept the lawyer's letter. I slipped it into my purse. My father entered the study. He looked at me, then at the drawer. His face changed, only slightly, but I noticed. Did you find the blue folder? Yes. Good. He walked toward me. Anything else? I smiled. No. He stared at me for a moment. Then he nodded. Good girl. That was when I knew. He suspected nothing, and I wasn't going to tell him. Not yet. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I contacted the lawyer whose name appeared on the letter. I expected him to be shocked. Instead, he sighed. I've been waiting for you to call. My heart stopped. What does that mean? Your father instructed me years ago that if you ever discover the documents, I was to explain everything. Everything? Yes. He sent me a secure file. Inside were hundreds of pages, and one recording. I listened to it with headphones. My father's voice filled the room. I'll put the company under Emma's name temporarily. Another man's voice asked, what if she finds out? My father laughed. She won't. The recording continued. Emma has always trusted me. I closed my eyes. Those words hurt more than anything else. Not because he had betrayed me, because he had counted on my love making me blind. But the recording wasn't finished. My father continued. Once the debts are cleared, I'll transfer everything back. The other man asked, and if the company fails? There was silence. Then my father answered, then Emma takes the loss. I removed the headphones. My hands were shaking. For years, I had thought I was the least important person in my family. I was wrong. I wasn't unimportant. I was useful. And my father had mistaken my kindness for weakness. 3 days later, I received another message from the lawyer. He had found something else. A bank account. It had been opened using my identification documents. The account had received large transfers from several companies connected to my father. Money had been moved through it for years. I stared at the numbers. Then I understood why he had wanted me financially dependent. If I ever became successful enough to examine my own finances, I might discover everything. So he had kept me struggling. He had made me believe I wasn't capable. He had made me doubt myself. And I had spent years believing him. Not anymore. I hired my own attorney. We contacted the authorities. We provided copies of every document, every signature, every recording, every transaction. And then we waited. I didn't confront my father. That was the hardest part. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk into his office and throw the papers across his desk. Instead, I stayed quiet. Because, for once, I wanted him to experience the same uncertainty he had created in me. 2 months later, my father called me. Emma, we need to talk. His voice sounded different, less confident. About what? About the company. I stayed silent. I think there has been a misunderstanding. I almost smiled. A misunderstanding? Some documents may have been filed incorrectly. Maybe. Your name was used because it was easier administratively. I closed my eyes. Was my signature also used because it was easier? Silence. Then he whispered, who told you? I knew then. He finally understood. I had found everything. I found it myself. Another silence. Then he said the words I had been waiting years to hear. I can fix this. No. Emma, please. No. I am your father. I looked out the window. For years, those words would have made me surrender. Not anymore. That's exactly why this hurts. He began crying. My father. The man who had never cried when I needed him. The man who missed my graduation because Lucas had a football tournament. The man who told me I didn't deserve help because I was strong enough. Now he was asking me to save him. I didn't want you to suffer, he said. But you decided I could. I was protecting the family. No. I took a breath. You were protecting yourself. He didn't answer. I loved you, I continued. That's why you were able to do this for so long. He whispered my name. I hung up. 6 months later, the investigation became public. The company was taken over. The accounts were frozen. My father faced charges for fraud and financial crimes. But something unexpected happened. The lawyer discovered that I wasn't the only person affected. There were former employees who had lost their savings. Small contractors who had never been paid. People my father had intimidated into silence. When the truth came out, they finally spoke. And suddenly, I understood something. My story wasn't really about revenge. It was about ending a pattern. My father had spent years teaching everyone around him that silence was easier than truth. I decided to teach myself the opposite. Truth might destroy a comfortable lie, but sometimes that is exactly what needs to happen. A year later, I stood outside the little house I had once dreamed of owning. It wasn't the apartment my father had promised me. I hadn't taken that. I didn't want anything that came from his lies. Instead, I had bought a small house with money from my own business. It had a crooked front porch, a tiny garden, and yellow curtains I chose myself. Nothing about it was impressive, but every inch belonged to me. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. My phone rang. It was Lucas. I answered. Hello. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I owe you an apology. I looked toward the sunset. For what? For believing him. I swallowed. You were his son. So were you his daughter? I smiled sadly. Yes. I should have asked questions. Maybe. I am sorry. This time, I believed him. We talked for almost an hour. Not about our father. Not about money. Just about our childhood. For the first time, we remembered the same memories from different sides. When the call ended, I sat quietly. I thought about the envelope, the wedding, the forged signatures, the recordings, the fear, and the woman I had been before I discovered the truth. She had spent years waiting for her father to choose her. I finally understood that he never had to. I could choose myself. I looked around my little house, the imperfect porch, the crooked garden, the yellow curtains, and I smiled, because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't a house. It isn't money. It isn't a family business. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is the moment you finally realize that your life belongs to you, and nobody gets to sign your name without your permission ever again. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, secrets, and the strength it takes to start over.